I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the Mayor's Stadium Task Force meets with Chargers Stadium point man, and we find out what the Chargers want and what the task force is saying about it. Also tonight, the president calls in a top negotiator trying to settle a long labor dispute at West Coast ports, including San Diego.
A San Diego company begins human clinical trials for treating Ebola. I'm Peggy Pica with how this trial will be different and why there's some ethical concerns. Plus, death cafes are becoming more popular in the county. What are they and why they're not as morbid as they may sound?
Also tonight, a look at a controversial method of in vitro fertilization. Backers say it gives hope to women who fear passing terrible diseases to their children, but critics say it could lead to designer babies. And we'll show you how a San Diego company is planting a legacy along the San Diego River. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. The San Diego Chargers have some advice for the mayor's task force. The group is supposed to come up with a football stadium plan by fall. A team representative met today with the Citizen Stadium Advisory Group, and KPBS reporter Taryn Mento has the details. Taryn, who was at that meeting and what were they talking about?
The 9-member group met with the team's Mark Fabiani. Fabiani's really been the Chargers' point man on a new stadium over the last 13 years. At the meeting, Fabiani turned over some of the team's research and gave the group access to a website with its documents and data. Now, when Mayor Kevin Faulconer first announced he was going to create a task force, Fabiani wasn't very pleased. What's he saying now? Following the meeting, Fabiani posted online a list of what he called principles that he thought the group should keep in mind. He urged the members to resist political pressure and said they should be sure their proposal would have a strong chance of receiving 2/3 voter approval. Chairman Adam Day held a news conference after the meeting. This is what he had to say when asked about voter approval.
There's a lot of distance between now and then, and we're not at that point to determine what kind of vote threshold is going to be required by the public. It's more than just saying that's what it has to be. I mean, there's a number of different ways to skin that cat, and we're going to evaluate all the different options that are available. So it sounds like it's still very early in the process. Did the task force share plans for its next meeting? The group plans to reach out to SDSU, which plays football at Qualcomm Stadium, and County Supervisor Ron Roberts. The county could help with financing a stadium. And a meeting for public comment should happen within the next couple of weeks. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Mento. Thanks, Taryn. A top labor official is in California to help resolve a contract dispute between West Coast dock workers and their employers. U.S. Labor Secretary Tom Perez stepped in after President Barack Obama ordered him to help both sides reach an agreement. Some workers are not being called in until tomorrow. In San Diego, the situation means less work for roughly 120 longshoremen. CBS 8 says its sports director, Kyle Kraska, is improving nearly a week after being shot outside his home. Kraska remains in the hospital tonight. The suspected gunman, Mike Montana, is scheduled to be arraigned tomorrow. Police say Montana had a business dispute with Kraska. A false alarm caused panic at Los Angeles International Airport today. Passengers fled onto the tarmac after a mistaken announcement that a man with a gun was on the loose. Officers did pursue an unarmed driver. Police say a rumor by an unknown person caused the panic, and they're now investigating who made that announcement. Commercial drones may soon be zipping through the skies. The Federal Aviation Administration is proposing new rules and new privacy protections. The move is a switch from the current ban on commercial drones, but it'll be another 2 to 3 years before the rules become final. The ACLU praised the proposal for privacy protections, but said they still fall short of protecting the public. New rules could include passing an FAA test and a background check. Operators will have to keep drones within eyesight at all times,
And drones won't be allowed within 5 miles of an airport or flying over crowds. Sign-up season for healthcare is over, but congressional lawmakers are asking for an extension. Fines are going up, and lawmakers want to help those who didn't sign up avoid penalty fees. H&R Block says there could be roughly 4 million people who didn't sign up properly. The IRS has warned healthcare-related tax issues could cause long call center hold times. World health experts say that West Africa's Ebola outbreak is slowing down, but clinical trials for Ebola drugs are revving up. Peggy Pico explains how one San Diego drug company is leading the pack.
More than 9,000 people in West Africa died from Ebola in the last year. There were 4 confirmed cases with 1 death in the U.S. The experimental drug ZMapp, developed here in San Diego, was used to treat a few Ebola patients. The drug will begin human clinical trials in the next few weeks in Liberia. Michael Kellichman, director of UC San Diego Center for Ethics in Science and Technology, joins us with what's at stake. And Michael, this human clinical trial will have up to 100 Ebola patients as participants. Some of those people will get the ZMapp drug. Others will not. Those who don't get it actually will just have the current standard of care treatment. So how is this different than the typical clinical human trial study?
What's different is this population and the circumstances that make it so difficult. What is the same is that we're trying to give somebody a new drug and comparing that to people who get the best treatment that we have available so far, which is the standard of care.
Some doctors question the ethics of doing a study this way, where everyone has the infection and could die, but not everybody is getting the drug.
This is true of any study, but it's worse here because so many people are so aware of how devastating this disease is. But the reality remains that until you know if the drug works and it's safe, you don't actually have something that's better for them. So it may be better to not be on the drug. We won't know until we do the trial.
In other words, the drug could have side effects or things like that.
Exactly.
What kind of things would stop the continuation of this trial of ZMapp?
Well, if it was clear from early work on the trial that more people were getting even sicker or the mortality rate was even higher, but with a disease that is so devastating as it is, it may be that it won't be apparent with 100 patients. They may not be able to see that.
So 100 patients seems like kind of a small number of people to try this out on. How many of those would have to be cured? I mean, how will we know if ZMapp is actually effective?
That's a tough question. I will simplify by saying if 100% of the people died normally with the infection, then you would need a relatively small number of people to see that people were surviving from it. But if the death rate is lower than that, for example, if it's on the order of 30 to 50%, which we often see, then it's going to take a lot of patients to be able to achieve confidence that the drug is better.
Now, MAP Biopharmaceutical in Sorrento Valley got $42 million from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to develop a ZMapp, to develop the drug, the serum, and to get it on a fast track to the FDA. So how could that influence, or could it put pressure on doctors, the developers of this drugs, or the results of this clinical trial?
Well, we always have a worry that if people have financial interests, they might do things that are inappropriate or compromise the best integrity of science. But the reality is there's no other way to do this. Without the resources, it wouldn't be possible to do such an important clinical trial.
And I understand that money came rather quickly. Our government took this threat very seriously. There's also an Ebola vaccine that's being tested as well in Liberia. What are the concerns with the vaccine?
What are the concerns with the vaccine? The main concern would be that that if you're going to do the trial, you don't know, again, whether it's safe or effective. It's not as bad usually with vaccines. We know that they tend to be relatively safe, but we do have a problem that we may have people, for example, who get the vaccine and think, I have a vaccine, it works, I'm safe, and they won't take precautions they normally should have taken.
What are some of the cultural or social conditions in West Africa that could influence, go back to the ZMapp clinical trial, are there things that could influence that trial there?
Well, for all of these trials, the biggest problem is the usual issue that we want people who participate in a clinical trial to be informed and understand what they're getting into. In this country, it's difficult. In a circumstance where people aren't familiar with research, where they come from poor socioeconomic backgrounds and communities, it's extraordinarily difficult. The standard has to be higher for how you do the trial. Make sure you get truly informed consent.
Is this sort of we're between a rock and a hard place doing a trial like this?
Absolutely. In a rock and a hard place where you have to deal with it now. You can't wait until later to try and deal with it.
All right, Michael Kalichman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This month, UK lawmakers approved technology that could create babies genetically related to 3 different people. Now, this procedure aims to help women who can't have kids of their own without the fear of passing on a terrible disease. But things are moving more slowly in the U.S. KPBS science reporter David Wagner says researchers and patients here can disagree about whether to try this in humans.
Do you girls want to color? Yeah.
Christina Whaley's daughters play like many kids their age.
Build me a castle to sleep in.
6-year-old Kaylin likes to scoot her toy car around the living room.
Yeah, show us how you push it.
She can even provide sound effects. But there's a lot Kaylin and her 4-year-old sister, Karis, can't do. They can't string together more than a few words. They can't walk.
Show us how you walk, sissy.
They can't do most routine tasks without help.
You know, I would have never thought that I would have 2 children with any kind of disease, and unfortunately that was what happened.
It happened because Whaley passed down faulty mitochondria to both of them. Mitochondria power all the cells in your body, and you get them directly from your mother. The DNA in Whaley's mitochondria is mutated.
Every egg that I have is going to have some percentage of the mutation.
Her daughters both inherited a rare type of mitochondrial disease known as NARP. Lifespan varies, but kids with severe forms of mitochondrial disease often don't live past childhood. It took Whaley more than 2 years to pin down a diagnosis for Kaylin. By then, she'd already given birth to Karis, not realizing she was passing down the same disease.
My dream was to have 3 to 4 kids, and that was always the idea and the plan, and we had it all like figured out as what ages I was going to have them and how spaced apart and what month I was going to get pregnant in, and everything was like all figured out.
Doctors have advised Whaley against having any more children, but soon they might be able to offer another option. Scientists have been developing a twist on in vitro fertilization that could help mothers like Whaley have children of their own without passing on disease. It's still a long way from any fertility clinic, but here's how the procedure could work. Doctors would extract an egg from the mother carrying bad mitochondria. They'd remove the nucleus from that egg, and with it, the genetic traits mom would pass down to her kids. Then they'd implant that nucleus inside another egg donated by a different woman, an egg with healthy mitochondria. Fertilize that egg with dad's sperm, and in theory, you'd end up with a baby free of mitochondrial disease. But because mitochondria do contain their own DNA, any child produced this way would inherit a small fraction of DNA from that second woman. That's why some have called this technique 3-parent in vitro fertilization.
This term, 3-parent embryo, is meant to be inflammatory and pejorative.
Evan Snyder, a professor at the Sanford Burnham Medical Research Institute, prefers the term nuclear transfer. Whatever you call it, it's highly controversial, something Snyder knows well. Last year, he chaired the FDA committee that decided to wait for more animal studies before recommending this for human trials. But even that cautious conclusion aroused fears that manipulating embryos to this extent could put us on the slippery slope toward designer babies.
That typically is what comes up. If we do it for mitochondrial diseases, will we start doing it for sex or for prowess in academics or sports?
Snyder says this procedure wouldn't let parents anywhere near genes for traits like eye color. That's why he urged lawmakers in the UK to vote yes.
I absolutely feel that the UK made the right decision.
I really felt like this vote was premature.
Paul Knopfler is a UC Davis School of Medicine professor who argues this would create genetically modified humans. He worries that using it to stamp out mitochondrial disease could lead to equally bad developmental disorders or miscarriage. And he points out that any unexpected problems in children born this way could be hereditary.
We're talking about, permanently changing human DNA, the human genome. And so I think it is reasonable to think about, how this could have repercussions for many generations in the future.
Let's build something.
Meanwhile, mothers like Christina Whaley are hopeful about any new option.
I definitely wanted to hear that there was an option for me to have more children. I definitely, can't imagine my life without having children in it. And of course, I want, a healthy child.
She's heard the concerns, but if the procedure were available tomorrow, she says she'd try it right away. David Wagner, KPBS News.
Video journalist Nick McVicker helped put that story together. We have more about this method of in vitro fertilization on our website, kpbs.org. The Death Cafe movement is growing here in San Diego. Peggy Pico explains why talking about death and the end-of-life issues is becoming more popular.
About a dozen or so so-called death cafes are in San Diego. While the idea of talking about death and dying over coffee may seem morbid at first, my guests say it could be a life-changing experience. Karen Van Dyke is founder of Death Cafe San Diego, and Scott Masters attended Death Cafe events. And Karen, what's the idea behind Death Cafe?
Death cafes are about conversation about death, dying, and living. As simple as that. It's a model that people think, well, isn't there more than that? There isn't more than that. It is truly about the conversation about those topics. And the conversation about those topics, what it does is it helps people to get used to it. When I have someone that comes up to me and says, I'm scared to death of death, and I have had that, you know that they're the perfect person to be at the Death Cafe, because at the end of that Death Cafe, they are smiling, they are laughing and saying, I'll be headed back. So it's simple. It's a simple model.
So you're saying laughing. These aren't necessarily somber events. Kind of walk us through the mood and the setting.
Yeah, it's in my experience after almost 2 years of doing this, it's never been somber. It's within 15 minutes of folks starting to sit down and me telling them about the background and the history and what's going to unfold. You start the conversation and the voices just start to rise at really peak levels. This is why we have to take the smaller groups and put them around so that you can hear. People are engaging, they're laughing, they're enjoying the tea and cake, they're exchanging information. It's a beautiful thing.
In Scott, you've attended a few of these. What got you interested?
Well, I've had a lot of fear around this topic. I've known a lot of people to die and never felt they were really prepared for that. And so my own desire to prepare and learn. Just a whole lot of learning happens in these death cafes.
What was it like for you? What's it like for somebody? These aren't brick and mortar cafes, right? These are different events that pop up and you go to it and kind of meet up at them. So what was it like for you to sit down with strangers and say, all right, we're going to talk about this very intimate thing?
Surprisingly very comfortable, and the topics that came up were pertinent, and there was just a lot of connection, and for me, I'm gaining courage by going, discovering and learning about myself. It's been a fascinating, so far, it's never boring, never boring.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not boring. I've heard laughter, I've heard these things, but what kind of issues actually come up? What kind of issues, Karen?
All kinds of issues come up. How do I want to be buried? Do I want to be cremated? I didn't know that I had to have that in writing. What do I want my family to do when I die? Have I created those documents? Have I written it down? Maybe I want a destination funeral. I need to take time to do that. There's a lot of no holes barred. We have no agenda. Whoever wants to bring up a topic brings it up, and the group just discusses it.
What's a destination? Excuse me. Explain that one to me.
No, what's happening, just like there are many, many destination weddings, there is a business that is evolving, and it's destination funerals. People going to, as an example, my aunt, I asked her, I said, where do you want to be buried? And she said, well, I'd like to have my remains spread over the mountains that I skied on. And I said, oh. I said, in Prague. And she said, yes. She said, that's what I would love.
Destination funeral. How is the subject, Karen, of religious beliefs handled?
Well, it's actually not handled. It's discussed.
Okay.
So people come, everybody has their own personal agenda, and that's what we love. We love that that agenda is out on the table because that's how we learn from each other, and it's really fabulous. So we welcome all. Yes,
the discussion,
atheists,
even
the religious, all. The most interesting conversation I ever had at a death cafe was with Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, and me that I call interspiritual. And that was the most fascinating conversation, and the person I was attracted to the most was the atheist. Amazing.
Interesting.
Amazing.
Interesting. Now, Scott, has your outlook on death changed?
It has. I would say I feel more courage around it and more lighter about it and not so anxious, and knowing that I'm just there to prepare myself and learn about how other people are preparing. It gives me a much greater feeling of connection with others and that I'm not alone, and so I'm glad to have found it.
All right, Scott Masters and Karen Van Dyke, thank you so much. And I want to let folks know that the next local Death Cafe events are this Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Pacific Beach Earl and Bertie Taylor Library and at 2 p.m. at the Metropolitan Community Church in Claremont. Events are free and open to the public. More details at kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. Joining us for our weekly look at how the 2016 presidential race is shaping up, Nia Malika Henderson and Amy Walter. Monday on the PBS News Hour.
During the recession, thieves would steal copper wiring and other metals to collect recycling money. Now they're turning to another material. The AP's Maggie Mazzetti explains.
Just before dawn, investigators launch a stakeout in San Bernardino County, California.
If it looks like he's going home after the first stop, then we'll take him down. We'll get him. We won't wait for a second stop.
They're tracking thieves who are turning another man's trash into their own treasure.
The recycle center's right here on Slover, and you can see the truck coming out from there now.
The coveted loot, cardboard.
We're going to go after him. We're going to go eastbound. It's going to be a green Chevy.
The problem isn't just contained to California. When the economy booms, cardboard prices spike. Manufacturers need more packaging for their goods. Thieves can net up to $200 a ton.
Well, what they do is they go to the local stores, shopping centers, they enter the recycle bins, and they take the cardboard. They stack it up in their little trucks or big trucks, whichever it might be, and ultimately they take that cardboard and turn it in for money for themselves.
Cardboard placed in recycling bins is considered the property of the local waste hauling company. In some areas, up to 3/4 of the cardboard disappears before the haulers arrive, cutting into their revenue, which in turn could mean higher prices for the service.
It's difficult for companies like us, Burtech Waste Industries, to offer low or no cost programs because they're offset by the value of the commodities within the container.
That's why authorities are cracking down on cardboard theft. This man had his haul confiscated pending further investigation. As authorities warn, taking another person's trash could land you in a heap of trouble. Maggie Mazzetti, Associated Press.
Volunteers from a San Diego biotech company were out giving a facelift to a stretch of the San Diego River in Santee today. It's the second time in as many years that Takeda San Diego employees and their families have planted more than 2,000 trees here. The company was looking for a way to offset their paper consumption. The tree planting offered a chance to build a tighter team and create a legacy.
We've been participating with the tree planting, and there's been frequent watering to make sure the trees are healthy after we put them in the ground. And hopefully this is going to be part of a trail that stretches from the mountains all the way to the ocean that people will be able to enjoy, hopefully for 100 years.
They only have to walk a few hundred yards up the river to see the impact. And these taller plants which have filled in this riverbed were planted a year ago in a similar effort.
And last year, those were little bitty plants about this big, and you can see how they've grown.
Paul Harmick has helped during both efforts. The San Diego River Park Foundation volunteer is amazed when he sees the bird and critter-friendly habitat he helped create.
When I first walk up and look at it, I'm always a little surprised at the success. And it's just a wonderful feeling to see that my work and the work of all the volunteers here, Takeda, that it's been fruitful, that we can look and see that yes, what we've planted has taken root.
This stretch of the river park is largely being developed by the city of Santee and the mining company that used to dig for rock here. This dirt road will eventually be a hiking trail. We do have some sunny days ahead, just like we had today. There is going to be some morning fog, though, occasionally. Coastal temperatures are going to be in the mid to upper 60s. Overnight lows are going to drop into the 50s. It's going to be low to mid 70s for the inland valleys with some cloudy skies. Again, the mercury dropping into the 50s as the overnight temperatures hit us. Look out into the mountains over the next couple of days. You're going to see sunny conditions up there. High temperatures in the upper 60s, going to reach 70 on Thursday. Overnight lows, though, will stay cool. Nice sleeping weather, 48, 50, and 47 through the next couple of days. And out in the desert, it's also going to be sunny with temperatures up in the 80s. Overnight lows comfortable right around 50 degrees most of those days. Here's what we're looking at, what we're working on tomorrow for the from the KPBS newsroom. We'll take a closer look at so-called eco-friendly forks and spoons. They're made of things like potato starch, and they're supposed to replace the plastic in your picnic basket. But can Spudware really help save the environment? We'll find out a bit more about that tomorrow. And on KPBS Midday Edition, we'll talk with comedian Maz Jobrani about his new book. It's titled, I'm Not a Terrorist, But I Played One on TV. The memoirs of a Middle Eastern funny man at noon on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here again tomorrow. Have yourself a great evening.